Hi, everybody, and welcome to the latest in the Export to Japan podcast series. And for this particular episode, we are going to be following up on an agreement that was signed at the start of December. I think it was 7th of December, 2022, an agreement known as the UK-Japan Digital Partnership. And we're going to learn a lot more about that agreement and what that may mean for UK companies. And to help us understand more about it, I'm delighted to welcome Jana Psarska. Did I get that pronunciation right, Jana?
Nearly, Psarska.
Psarska, that's it. Thank you. I've got it now. Jana Psarska of techUK. Jana, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you here with us.
Thanks, Steve. Pleasure to be here.
Great. Well, before we dive into the detail of this agreement, I'd like to just open up by understanding a little bit more about the organization that you represent, techUK. I don't want to make the assumption that everybody here knows what techUK is and what you do. So could you just elaborate and tell us a little bit more about your organization, please?
Yes, of course. techUK is the UK's Technology Trade Association. We bring together nearly over 900 members. So in our membership, we have the likes of Google, IBM, Cisco, so really big multinationals. But nearly around 70% of our membership is composed of small to medium-sized enterprises. And our work is centered around three main areas, including policy advocacy. So we represent the UK's tech industry voice vis-a-vis government. We do also a lot of work around creating commercial opportunities for tech businesses, tech UK members, through our events, networking activities, where we bring together suppliers and buyers. And also we do a lot of work around emerging technologies, where we look at commercialization of technologies such as AI, digital identity, cloud, and also how to regulate those technologies. So we don't stifle innovation, but rather drive it. I'm policy manager for international trade, and I sit the web international trade program at techUK. That is one of the 20 plus programs at techUK. So we have programs focused on cyber security, healthcare, sustainability, and so on. And international trade program really work with UK SMEs to help them expand into overseas markets. We help our members understand the scale of export opportunities across Asia Pacific, US, and other markets around the world, but also associated market access barriers and how to overcome them. We do also a lot of work around digital trade policy. And I would like to flag the UK-Japan Tech Forum, which I'm sure we will get to later during the discussion. So UK-Japan Tech Forum is one of the working groups that we have at the International Trade Program. And it's a platform where we bring together the UK members and stakeholders across government, academia, and industry to really discuss areas of UK-Japan trade, policy, and bilateral market growth. The forum is run in partnership with JETA, and JETA is our counterpart in Japan, Japanese Technology Trade Association.
Okay, that sounds great, and some amazing work that your organization is doing there. Just very approximately, what kind of number of members do you have as part of your association?
So we have around 900 members, and as I mentioned, yeah, many of those, I would say nearly 70% are smaller members. The majority are UK-based companies, but some of our members are also Japanese corporates, right? So I think I can mention the information is publicly available. We have Fujitsu, NEC, NTT in our membership. So really big Japanese corporates that obviously have a significant presence in the UK, but also smaller companies from India, US, Australia that are already well matured in their domestic markets and are trying to sort of grow their footprint in the UK.
Oh, I see. So companies do not necessarily have to have a presence in the UK in order to become members of techUK. Companies can become members.
In fact, they do. Well, they don't need to have a physical presence, but they need to be at least registered for tax purposes in the UK.
Okay, I've got it. Yeah, that's good to know because we know that quite a large percentage of viewers and listeners to these podcasts are actually Japanese corporate. So it will be good for them to know a little bit more about what you do and understand a bit more about the potential for them to become members. So I would certainly say for any of those Japanese corporates listening and, reach out to techUK because it may be that you have some eligibility in some case to become a member and get involved anyway in what techUK is doing. Okay, well, that's a great introduction. So thank you for that. You've obviously mentioned your role and what you do, the great work you do to help with the internationalization for UK companies. And that's a very nice link in to talk a little bit more and introduce this agreement. So as I mentioned, I believe it was signed at the end of last year. It's referred to as the UK-Japan Digital Partnership. But please, could you tell us more about this agreement and what it's all about, please?
Yes, sure, Steve. So the partnership, UK-Japan Digital Partnership, as you mentioned, was announced last year in December to really deepen bilateral collaboration between both countries on emerging technology, data innovation, data sharing, and supply chain resilience, among others. The partnership built upon a very strong historic ties between both countries. Especially in the tech area, right? There are a lot of sort of complementarities between both countries. And the partnership builds upon a UK joint statement from 2019. I'm sure most of our listeners would be also familiar with the UK-Japan Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement that I know the British Embassy in Tokyo and also Digital Trade Network are tirelessly working to promote its benefits and opportunities that it open up for UK companies in Japan and vice versa. So it builds upon all these initiatives, agreements, and also when we started seeing UK-Japan's intentions to deepen a bilateral collaboration was already in early 2022 when both countries pledged or committed to bolster digital collaboration and announced a statement of intention to sort of work towards mechanisms and initiatives that would do that. Yeah, and those intentions translated into official partnership that was announced last year. We need to see that also within the sort of geopolitical context, right? The UK committed to in its digital strategy announced in 2021, UK committed to drive international collaboration on complex tech issues. And to drive that collaboration, obviously, the UK is looking to, or is kind of approaching like-minded partners like Japan. Japan and UK, they have very common approaches to addressing some of the complex digital issues, whether that's regulation or standards on the international level. But also, both countries have a complementary strengths in tech areas, right? Just to give you an example for it, UK is very strong in AI, data analytics, whereas Japan is very strong in production of quantum computers, for example. One of the biggest and best quantum computer centers are in Japan. When it comes to semiconductor, UK might be good in design of semiconductor. Japan is also very good at production and manufacturing of semiconductors. So again, these are the areas where both countries can come together and open up. Well, again, drive discussion, international collaboration, and standardization of some of these technologies on the international level. But also, this eventually open up opportunities for companies in the UK as well. And I also wanted to mention that the UK and JATA, we published a white paper titled Strengthening UK-Japan Cooperation on Tech and Innovation earlier last year, where we actually proposed a set of recommendations for both governments on strengthening bilateral collaboration on data sharing, emerging technologies, supply chain resilience, And many of our recommendations were actually reflected in the UK-Japan digital partnership. So it really shows that the industry has had an opportunity to actually inform the government dialogue, especially in this case.
That's amazing. Yeah, really good. And I suspect there's been a lot of work going on to pull this together in a relatively short space of time. You've made references there to several different sort of sector and tech areas. You spoke about AI, for example. You spoke about data sharing, emerging technologies, etc. In terms of the document and the agreement itself, are there any particular sort of focus areas listed or priority areas where collaboration is seen to be potentially possible?
Mm-hmm. So the document set out the four main areas of collaboration. Obviously, this might be expanded upon later on, but at the moment we have four areas that are set out as primary objectives of bilateral collaboration, and that includes digital technologies and infrastructure, data, digital regulation and standards, and digital transformation. So digital infrastructure and technologies. Here we are talking about supply chain resilience of telecoms and semiconductors. So those two areas I already mentioned, and technologies such as AI. We also the document is also referring to strengthening cyber resilience, for example. And when it comes to data, both countries are committed to actually strengthening the foundation for trade and investment and making it easier, obviously, for businesses on both sides to operate in each other's markets by aligning regulatory approaches, by aligning approaches to digital regulation. And I'm sure, Steve, that the companies, especially digital companies that you speak to, they reference digital divergence or regulation as one of the top market access barriers they kind of come across when they looking at the overseas markets. And the reason for that is that it's very costly to again align. Let's say you develop a product in the UK or in the US, and in Japan you have different regulation, whether that's AI or around any other emerging tech. So you need to again either invest time and resources into understanding how this regulation impact your operation, or how you need to actually adapt your product and operation to comply with that regulation. Mm-hmm. And hence, having common regulation and standards, obviously it makes it much easier for businesses to operate in each other's markets. And digital transformation. The UK obviously has done a lot of work around digital transformation and has very similar approach to digital transformation, or at least there are definitely common interests with Japan's Society 5.0 that was launched a few years ago, where again Japan is looking at transforming society by leveraging digital technologies, but with human-centric approach at the heart of it. So we're looking again at the opportunities for UK, but also other companies in sectors such as mobility, infrastructure, health, fintech, perhaps, because all those are areas where, again, Japan will have to sort of, transform those areas to address issues such as aging population, climate change, and so on. So again, issues that UK has as well, and the UK companies also have solutions that can be sort of applied to address some of those challenges.
Understood. Yeah. Actually, just as you're running through some of those examples, it's reminding me of a podcast discussion we did a month or so ago when we interviewed some Japanese guests to talk about the Osaka 2025 Expo that's taking place. And when we drilled down and picked out the themes for the Osaka Expo, they're all very, very similar themes to the ones that you're talking about that this agreement is looking at. And that was identified as a great opportunity for UK companies to start to develop their strategy and look at the Japanese market. And the expo that's going on, it's still a couple of years away, but the expo that's going on will be a great kind of pivotal turning point for many UK companies coming to the market. But it's just great to see how all these things tie up. You know, the agreement that you've been working on and you've clearly got in place is also focusing on so many of the same areas. So it's wonderful to see this tying together. Now, from an SME's point of view, that it's, you know, maybe hearing about this agreement for the first time and starting to appreciate all the great work that's gone in at these government to government levels. There's clearly an awful lot of work that's been put in to make this agreement happen. And you've already given some really good examples of the value of an agreement like this. You know, you spoke about the regulations, the standards, the digital transformation, things like Society 5.0 in Japan. But why are agreements like this so important and so necessary for you know, from a UK company's point of view? Why are these agreements so important and necessary? What's the value that it brings?
Yeah. So the value of this agreement might not bring immediate short-term results or opportunities for SMEs. The value, especially in this UK-Japan digital partnership, lies in its long-term prospect, in the opportunities that it might open up in the long run. Obviously, I already touched upon digital regulation and the value of bringing together regulation or having a sort of common approaches to regulation, common standards in certain technologies, how it can actually save time and money to especially smaller businesses that don't really have those resources at the very beginning and might be actually discouraged exactly by all these issues they need to face. They might be discouraged from internationalization. So again, the value of the dialogue and having commitment from both governments to actually align regulatory approaches is invaluable, in my opinion. Also, the value of agreement is that both countries kind of speak the same voice on the international level as well, meaning that we are moving towards more harmonization on international level as well. And that's in organizations such as OECD, G7, for example. Again, something that when you are SME might not mean that much to you, but in the long run, it definitely will open up opportunities and plays actually important part in open up opportunities for digital tech companies. Again, as I mentioned, it does also generate a platform for R&D partnerships, right? If both countries commit to sort of sharing information and knowledge about, let's say, Open RAN or AI, it necessarily leads to creating some sort of research visits, business delegation, joint development projects at some point, whether that's area of cyber, telecoms, AI, quantum, semiconductors, and that creates opportunities for businesses.
Excellent. Yeah. And that's a very clear summary of why I guess all your hard work is so worth it. So thank you for that. Okay, well, we've given a very good overview of what the agreement is about and some of the detail within the agreement and what it means to UK companies. In terms of what happens next, if any UK companies, any of our listeners are sort of listening in here and thinking, okay, this sounds really interesting, I'd like to know more. Is there a way that any companies can get involved in this or get more information on this? What's the next steps for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So the government is still sort of, shaping up its agenda, how to proceed further. So obviously the agreement set out 4 main areas of its focus of further dialogue. There will be the first ministerial meeting in April. But in the last UK-Japan Tech Forum meeting we held actually only a couple of weeks ago, we were informed that the government is very much working on the work streams for industry to get involved. So both governments are keen to have an industry input and hear from businesses what sort of challenges they face in both markets. I already mentioned telecoms, right? So the telecom industry has become very consolidated in the last few years. But more diversity brings more resilience and innovation, and both governments recognize that. So again, in this agreement, there are commitments from both sides to diversify telecoms networks, to bring more vendors into 5G telecoms networks, to bring sort of more suppliers, open doors, which open commercial opportunities again for UK companies in Japan and vice versa. So there are commitments like that. Again, I can imagine there will be work streams or there will be sort of partnerships between government departments such as DCMS in the UK, but also Innovate UK, where companies can again either sign up for some sort of opportunities or open calls. Again, in semiconductors that I mentioned earlier, right? I can imagine that in the UK is right in the process of actually putting together its semiconductor strategy.
Mhm.
Japan is a little bit far ahead on this. Both countries are also members of G7. So how we can strengthen bilateral collaboration on increasing production capacity of semiconductors, on improving workforce, R&D. I can imagine there will be some, again, either joint development projects or R&D initiatives where companies, whether that's big or small ones, can get involved. So again, this is a matter of kind of SMEs to really be on the lookout for those opportunities. Check a government website or get in touch with you, Steve, and kind of, again, get a rundown of what's in the pipeline for UK-Japan tech trade. So I just wanted to highlight those opportunities, but also the digital transformation, right, that I referred to earlier. techUK there are a lot of synergies between techUK's leveling up agenda and Japan's digital garden city initiative, if I got it right. So again, with the focus on how we can leverage digital technologies to transform or lower regional disparities across both countries. Whether that's increased digital adoption, whether that's increased digital access to government services. And again, to do that, you will need digital services. You will need sort of procure those digital services. So I guess, again, more opportunities for UK companies. But again, I appreciate that sometimes it's difficult to access those opportunities, and companies need help from experts either on the ground in Japan or here in the UK. But I also want to kind of take a step back and just very briefly talk about those opportunities that are already available and were facilitated by policy tools. Steve, I mentioned UK-Japan CIPA, right? A free trade agreement, and I'm sure you are aware, and some of your colleagues work on very hard. Those opportunities are already in place. So there are provisions, there are references in that agreement to data localization removements. So companies, whether that's AI or fintech UK companies, don't have to actually set up a server in Japan to provide their services, which again saves them money because sometimes you want to sell services, but you don't want to make that long-term financial commitment, which obviously costs a lot of money to set up a server. So again, you are not required to localize data in Japan in case you are a fintech provider, for example. There are also provisions on open open government data. So companies, AI, for example, companies, they need actually access to large data sets, right? To train their algorithms, which is very important for their innovation. They can again do that. So they can access large data sets in that country without actually being there, without having a presence there. So again, some of those benefits are already there, available, and the agreement actually opened up a lot of opportunities, especially for fintech, AI, and cyber companies. I would like to sort of, highlight those three areas. And then again, UK-Japan agreement that we already discussed.
Yeah, they are points really, really well made there, and thank you for mentioning those. And actually, I can definitely confirm from our perspective at Export to Japan, since the CIPA agreement was signed and the benefits of that are starting to kind of roll through and become understood, we've seen a massive increase in UK companies exactly in those spaces you're talking about, AI in particular, and also cybersecurity, and even with the big defense and security show coming up in Japan very shortly, there's a big delegation of UK companies going out as part of that one. So you're right, we really are beginning to see some of the reality on the ground of stuff actually happening that falls out of these great agreements that you and your colleagues work on.
Yeah. And it's great to see that actually what we work on, you see in practice. So that's a sort of testimony
absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely
Yeah.
does. Yeah, and yeah, you're right. It's really good to see that, because we all know that there's a huge amount of work that goes on behind the scenes to make these kind of agreements work. The negotiation, the detail is huge, and we don't always appreciate when we're at the coalface. We don't always appreciate the work that's being done, but there is definitely a good example here of how we are now definitely seeing the benefits of these agreements, and I'm sure it will be exactly the case with this agreement that we've been discussing here today as well. And I would certainly say, just adding a few points to what you made there, any of our listeners or viewers that are consuming this podcast discussion, I hope that's been super helpful for you, to give you a good introduction to this agreement, and the background behind it, what the agreement's about, and what it means for UK business community. And feel free to reach out. You can contact us at Export to Japan, reach out to techUK as well, and reach out to Jana and her colleagues there. And of course, the trade teams over in Japan at the British Embassy and the consulate in Osaka, they're all willing and part of this discussion as well. So reach out to any of us if you want further help and want more detail. And certainly there are ongoing programs of help and support, and trade missions and exhibitions and online initiatives that are being worked on by DIT and the team in Japan, supported by organizations like techUK. So make sure that you become aware of those, get yourself registered as a member on Export to Japan so you get details on those coming up, because there's a lot coming up, particularly in these sectors we've discussed today. But that's been a great discussion. Jana, I want to thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all the hard work you've been doing in the background working on this agreement. I'm sure that there's an awful lot that's gone on to make it happen. And certainly thank you for taking some time out today to come and share some of the detail with us and tell us much more about it. So much appreciated. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.